All right, get ready to dig deep, because this time we're venturing into the heart of Madrid. Well, not quite the heart, more like its grand necropolis, the Almudena Cemetery.
And grand it is. Over 120 hectares, home to 5 million souls. Makes you realize it's practically a city within a city, doesn't it?
More residents than living Madrid, imagine that. It even has its own avenues, sections, a bus road even, I hear.
Right, it's laid out like a mirror of the city itself. Fascinating how even in death, those echoes of life remain.
Speaking of echoes, I can't help but think about how this grand cemetery we're about to explore started, well, not so grandly.
Ah, you're talking about the cholera epidemic, 1884.
Yeah, when a sudden need for a burial ground put the brakes on the whole grand necropolis idea.
They had to adapt, and fast. Thus, the Almudena Cemetery as we know it began, born from a crisis. A poignant reminder, wouldn't you say?
It really makes you think about the weight of history a place like this holds. But you know, enough about the grand scale. Let's zoom in on something much more personal.
Oh, you mean like the lithotofios? The epitaphs. Lithotofios. It's a more, shall we say, evocative term for those little messages carved in stone.
Oh, right. I always find those fascinating. Little windows into how people wanted to be remembered.
Exactly. Some are straightforward, just names and dates, but others, oh, they get creative. Like that one, there is nothing. Haunting, isn't it?
So stark.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder about the story behind it.
Then you have those with a bit of, well, flair. Take Tony LeBlanc, for instance. Remember him?
The Spanish actor, right?
That's the one. His epitaph, end of part 1. Almost makes you want to find part 2 somewhere in the cemetery.
Maybe we will. I love how these little details add layers to the whole experience.
It's that human touch, wouldn't you say?
Speaking of human touches, let's talk about the civil cemetery within Almudena.
Ah, yes. The resting place of those who, shall we say, didn't quite fit the mold. Freethinkers, artists, even a few Freemasons sprinkled in.
And their headstones, well, they're like their own secret language.
Indeed. Truncated columns, squares, compasses, symbols, whispering their affiliations in a time when speaking openly was dangerous.
A hidden language etched in stone. Really makes you think, doesn't it? But, you know, we can't talk about a cemetery as old and storied as this without addressing the elephant, or rather the ghost in the room.
Oh, are we diving into Almudena's spooky side now?
We are, and trust me, this place has ghost stories for days.
It seems cemeteries and ghost stories just go hand in hand, wouldn't you agree?
Like peanut butter and jelly. And speaking of perfect pairings, let's start with the legend of Fausto, the exterminating angel.
Ah, imposing figure, isn't he? Perched atop the main chapel, trumpet in hand, like he's about to announce the end of times.
Talk about ominous, even in broad daylight. But it's that trumpet that really gets people going.
The legend goes, if you hear it play, well, it's not a good sign. A premonition of death, some say.
Right. Chilling stuff. There's even a rumor that the trumpet was originally at his lips, but they moved it because it was just too creepy.
An intriguing thought, though I have to confess, there's no historical evidence to support that claim.
Which honestly makes it even more interesting, right? Adds to the whole mystery. But Fausto isn't the only restless soul said to roam these grounds. Have you heard about the phantom gravedigger?
The one who pops up out of thin air, ready to chat about the artistic merits of a mausoleum, then vanishes as quickly as he appeared.
The one and only. I mean, talk about a captive audience, right?
It does make you wonder why, of all places, cemeteries seem to breed these kinds of stories.
It's like the veil between worlds is a little thinner here. A thought to ponder. But let's move from the phantom to a very real tragedy etched in Almudena's memory, the Teatro Novidade's fire.
1928. A night that began with such promise, the thrill of a performance, and ended in unimaginable tragedy.
A packed theater, the curtains rise, the play begins. Then, a flicker of fire.
A faulty stage light, they say. The fire spread rapidly, fueled by the theater's wooden structure, trapping many inside.
80 souls perished that night. Their stories forever intertwined with the Teatro Novidade's, and their memory, well, it's kept alive within Almudena itself.
A somber reminder. It's said that on the street where the theater once stood, people claim to see ghostly figures, still searching for a building long gone.
Haunted by a memory, a place lost to time.
It does send shivers down your spine, doesn't it? To think those lost souls are still searching for their beloved theater. But the Teatro Novidade's isn't the only place in Almudena with ghostly tales attached, you know. They say even the bus drivers have their own share of strange encounters.
Oh, right. The bus route that actually goes through the cemetery. The 110, if I'm not mistaken.
The very one. And drivers, they've reported some odd happenings, particularly at the final stop, the one right by the cemetery gates.
Let me guess. phantom passengers.
You could say that. Picture this. The driver's finishing their route, bus completely empty. Suddenly, that stop requested light, it flickers on.
No, well,
Oh, yes. They check their mirrors, expecting, well, someone. But there's nothing. No one. Just an empty bus and that eerie light.
Spooky. It's like whatever, or whoever, requested that stop wants to disembark right at the cemetery gates. Almost like they're drawn to it.
Perhaps they just need a ride to the other side. But all jokes aside, it does make you wonder about the energy a place like Almudena holds. And speaking of energy, I'm still thinking about those other stories, those individuals who found their final resting place here.
Oh, Almudena's full of them.
Yeah.
From the famous to the everyday folks, each with a story to tell. But like you said, their stories are no less impactful.
Yeah.
Take Rosario the Dynamiter, for example. Now, there was a woman who lived life on her own terms.
The Dynamiter, you say? That's quite a nickname.
Well earned. She was a fighter in the Spanish Civil War, and let's just say she had a certain, shall we say, affinity for explosives.
I see. Not someone to be trifled with, then.
Not at all. She literally lost her hand to the very weapon she wielded.
My goodness. Dedicated to the cause, one might say.
Absolutely fearless. But here's the thing. Her story, it caught the eye, or rather the ear, of the poet Miguel Hernandez.
Miguel Hernandez, the one who wrote those deeply moving verses about love and loss during the war.
The very same. He was so moved by her story, he immortalized her in his work.
Out of all the stories, all the lives touched by the Spanish Civil War, what was it about Rosario, this dynamiter, that moved him to preserve her memory in verse? It begs the question, doesn't it? Why do some stories get remembered while others fade?
A question for the ages, really. But it's something we see time and again within Almudena's walls. These echoes of lives lived, loves lost, struggles endured. Some stories are etched in stone, others whispered on the wind.
Like that of the 13 Roses, their memorial, a constant reminder of the tragedy that unfolded within Almudena's shadow.
Those young women, executed during the Franco regime. Their story still sends chills down my spine.
Such a tragic loss of life, so much potential extinguished too soon. And that wall...
The very one where they met their fate. I can't even imagine. It's a stark reminder of the very real human cost of political turmoil.
It's easy to get caught up in the grand narratives, but Almudena, it brings us face to face with the individuals caught in those currents. We see it in the grandeur of the mausoleums, side by side with the humblest of graves, some barely marked at all.
It's like Almudena itself is a testament to the fact that death, like life, doesn't play favorites. It really is humbling, isn't it? Walking among these graves, you realize just how vast and varied the human experience truly is.
And how it all inevitably leads us here, to this finality, this shared destination, no matter our walks of life.
It's almost like Almudena is this, well, I don't want to say microcosm because we've used that word a lot, but
If you're onto something.
it's like a reflection, not just of Madrid's past, but of its very essence.
The city of the dead mirroring the city of the living. And within that reflection, we find these individual stories shining through, like Rosario's, a woman who, well, she certainly didn't let society dictate her path.
Rosario, the Dynamiter. Now there's a woman who wouldn't back down from a challenge. Her story's forever intertwined with that turbulent chapter of Spanish history.
The Spanish Civil War, a period that tested the very soul of this nation. And her story reminds us that history isn't just about dates and battles. It's about the human beings who lived through those tumultuous times.
The ones who dared to fight for what they believed in, even if it meant risking everything. And speaking of echoes from the past, I keep coming back to those epitaphs, the lithotophios as you call them.
Ah, those final messages etched in stone. They offer such a unique window into the human relationship with mortality, don't you think?
It's like each one is a carefully chosen phrase, a last chance to speak across the ages, to tell the world, hey, this is how I want to be remembered, or maybe, just maybe, to offer a hint of what lies beyond the veil.
Some embrace simplicity, like that one we discussed earlier. There is nothing. 3 little words that speak volumes, don't they?
They really do. So stark, so final. And yet there's a certain beauty in that starkness, I think, an acceptance of the unknown.
Then you have those who choose humor, a touch of lightheartedness in the face of the inevitable. Like our friend Tony LeBlanc with his theatrical end of part 1.
He was quite the character in life, so it's fitting that his epitaph would reflect that same sense of playfulness, even in death.
It's that range of responses, that spectrum of human emotion, even in the face of death, that makes exploring these epitaphs so fascinating.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about what we'll leave behind, what our own epitaphs will say.
It's a question we all grapple with, consciously or not. What mark will we make? What will be our legacy?
It's a sobering thought, but an important one. As we leave Almudena Cemetery behind, I think we're taking a little piece of its wisdom with us.
May it serve as a reminder to embrace the preciousness of life, to live with intention, and to face the unknown with both courage and curiosity.
Well said. And until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep listening for the echoes of the past, for they have much to teach us about ourselves and the world around us.